Continuing our course on modern architecture, for the next few sections we'll look at Frank Lloyd Wright. We will have 10 sections here. First one's the overview, which we're doing right now, then a brief biography. We'll then look at Wright's Prairie Style houses, his Larkin building and Unity Temple. Then we'll look at his work in the 1920s, 1930s, the 1950s. We'll then look at some patterns in Wright's work and see how they play out. We'll look at his relationship to the 20th century, and we'll end with a discussion of organic architecture. My name is John Lobel. I'm a professor of architecture at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. I studied at the University of Pennsylvania. I've written several books, including one on the architect Louis I. Kahn, titled Between Silence and Light, Spirit and the Architecture of Louis I. Kahn. I'm the director of research for a project called Timeship. You can find out more about it at timeship.org. It's a biotech and life extension research facility. I have several dozen videos on YouTube. You can find them by searching for John Lobel, and there's about a dozen on Frank Lloyd Wright if you'd like to explore further. I'm just finishing a book on visionary creativity. You can find out more about it at visionarycreativity.com, and you can find out more about me at johnlobel.com. So, Frank Lloyd Wright, an overview. We'll do a brief bio of Wright, but for now, let's just get a quick look here and see Wright was born in 1867. The American Civil War, which we tend to think of as a long time ago, had ended in 1865, just 2 years before that. At that time, 53% of the labor force in the United States were farmers, and Wright lived in the age of the transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson, who died when Wright was 15 years old. So Emerson was not a historical figure for Wright, but someone who was alive when he was. When Wright died in 1959, we were in the midst of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Only 8% of the labor force were farmers, and information workers had come to equal factory workers. It was an age of television, satellites, atomic energy, and just 2 years before President John F. Kennedy gave his speech announcing that America would be going to the moon. Wright did over 1,000 designs and over 500 completed works scattered all over the United States, just a couple in other countries. Now let's look at early work, and we could almost call this Frank Lloyd Wright before he was Frank Lloyd Wright. This is his own house, the Wright House or Studio in Oak Park, Illinois, which was a suburb of Chicago. And we see here the influence of something called the shingle style. So on the left we have the Chandler House by Bruce Price in Tuxedo Park, New York, and we see strong similarities between that and Wright's own house. The first project he did on his own is the Winslow House in River Forest, Illinois. We see this low-sloped overhanging roof. We see the second story in shadow, emphasizing horizontality. So we're already getting hints of Wright's mature work. And Wright's fully developed mature work comes in the early 1900s with the Prairie Style. The archetypal example of Wright's Prairie Style is the Roby House in Chicago. We have low-sloped, overhanging cantilevered roofs. We've got an asymmetry. We have an open plan with the space meandering around a strong chimney core which pins down the otherwise pinwheeling plan. And we've got an interpenetration of inside and outside and a sense of movement across the American prairie. Inside we see the space of the living room flow around and even through the chimney core to the dining room, and a whole wall opening up as windows. Around this time he does the Larkin Building in Buffalo, which is going to be a theme he'll use in his commercial buildings, giving us a major space, a minor space, entrance in between, balcony running around, and a skylit center. We see a similar theme in his Unity Temple in Oak Park, Illinois, a church, and it's a pioneering use of poured-in-place exposed concrete. In the 1920s, Wright does a series of what he calls concrete textile houses. First one is the Maillard house in Pasadena, California. And so he has a double wall, which you want with masonry, so that you can handle condensation and get insulation from the space in between. And it's made up of a series of concrete blocks, or actually better described as tiles, about 4 inches thick, and with these little rounded corners that allows him to put 1/4-inch reinforcing bars between them, fill in with grout, so that it allows a unique contemporary concrete form of construction. Wright went into obscurity, didn't have any work for about a decade, but then in the 1930s had a major re-emergence, which we see with Falling Water, which became one of the most famous houses in the world. We see him continuing his theme of flowing open space, interpenetration of inside and outside with floor-to-ceiling glass. Around the same time, he does Johnson Wax headquarters. And here we see his mushroom or lily pad columns with skylights in between in the interior. In the 1950s, we get a sort of summing up. He does a high-rise tower in Bartlettsville, Oklahoma, with this kind of core in the center, the structure in the center like a trunk of a tree, and then the space is cantilever out from that. And, of course, the Guggenheim Museum, 1959 in New York City. Now let's just take a very quick look at the span of Wright's career. Here again is the Winslow House, Wright's first project on his own. See over here this archway. You go through here to the stables in the back. So the client had horses. This is one of Wright's last projects, didn't get built, but the Illinois, a proposed project for a mile-high tower, and it was designed to have atomic-powered elevators. So we see this sweep of change over the course of Wright's career. So that was our overview, and our next talk will be a brief biography of Frank Lloyd Wright.